Howdy folks, welcome back. In this video we're going to be looking at how to take our pseudocode and turn it into actual code. This honestly is an important step that I think a lot of beginning things leave out because they just kind of assume, oh, you know how to code. But it's sometimes not easy, especially if you've not done a great job with your pseudocode. The thing is, though, this also gets very intuitive eventually. So eventually this is a step you get to skip, but for now, let's get into it. So starting off with toSum, this is the pseudocode that we were able to come up with in the last video, where we talked about how to break our steps down into pseudocode. Now, I'm actually turning this into JavaScript. First of all, I'm going to build a function, right? Function toSum nums target. So that's the start off, just because everything in LeetCode needs that function. Sometimes you may not need this. So then what I do actually is I take this, I pop it in here, and I put comments on every single one of it. Some of these may not be useful, but what this does is this actually gives you the ability, your code is now commented. So not only do I know what I'm doing now rather than have to keep looking back here, my code is commented. So let's start here. Loop over all numbers front as num using I as an index. Well, I have an index, okay. So I need a let less than nums.length I plus plus. And this is where I'm reading into what I did before. All numbers as num equals nums of I. So I've actually got two statements coming out of this one pseudocode statement, and that's okay, as long as that works for you and you know what you're doing. If you ever get to the point where you see one of these statements and you don't know how to turn it into real code, your pseudocode's not simple enough. Break it down again. Look at that. Say, what is that statement actually doing? And break it down to simpler statements. That can be difficult. So if that is difficult, take a step back, look at your steps here, and walk through again, how are we doing this? Why did I write my pseudocode that way? What was that intended to entail? And maybe my actual steps here are not simplistic enough. Maybe I missed a step. Maybe I didn't write something down. So this is the point where everything really comes together, and if you're missing anything, you can have problems. So this is basically the same loop, but using j, all numbers past num, so that's I plus 1, okay? J less than nums.length. This is also where syntax starts mattering, because if I type something wrong, nums of j, and this is important, that numbers past num, that's just how I interpret this I plus 1. You could do that however you want. You might write that differently. Sum equals add them. Okay, sum equals num plus num2. If you don't know what them is, you should have been more explicit in your pseudocode. This is also not a great comment, right? This doesn't add anything to the code. These two do. I'm going to get rid of this just because it doesn't really add anything. If sum is target, so let's see, if sum equals target, I mean, that just kind of writes itself. And this whole return ij, actually also that's just valid code. I'm going to change this a little bit to be if it's a match. Okay. That can be a little bit more helpful, right? Here's our toSum. So here's our algorithm now. We had our pseudocode, wrote this out into an algorithm, and you notice it's got some comments. Are they super helpful comments? Not really. Mostly because my pseudocode was very code-like. Eventually you get to the point where your pseudocode is a little less code-like because you are more familiar with how to turn pseudocode into code, and your comments become much better. So like, I would actually just say, turn this into loop all numbers, loop over numbers past num. That's helpful, right? That's a little bit better. It's just saying like, what are we doing here? Okay, we're looping over all numbers past num. Great, makes sense. Okay, I went through that pretty quickly because I understand my pseudocode well. I'm very familiar with writing pseudocode in a way that makes sense for me to write code from. If you have trouble with this step, practice your pseudocode, practice writing actual code and thinking, how would I describe this in a way that's pseudocode-like? Right, because that's the whole point of pseudocode. It should be for you. It's your own personal little programming language that you're going to compile yourself into actual code. So if it's not working for you, change it. Figure out what does work. Practice. This is all going to be for you. And trust me, an interviewer might ask you, what does that pseudocode mean? But we as interviewers are pretty friendly with reading pseudocode. Like we're pretty used to it. Unless your pseudocode doesn't make any sense at all, even if it's not something we would write, we generally get what you're doing. Also because when you're interviewing, you're telling us your thought process. Let's take a look at another one. Let's take a look at our palindrome. Okay, so here's our pseudocode here. Here I actually did put a couple of the algorithms in. Loop from 0 to here with index n. Okay, well I'm going to copy that actually. For let n equals 0, n less than, and this is actually going to be math.ceiling, number.length. Well, here's the thing. Oh, I forgot my function. Function is palindrome number. Well, there's a problem right there. I just know off the top of my head, I can't really get the length of a number like that. In my pseudocode, that didn't really matter much because pseudocode, you can do anything. But I happen to know in JavaScript, I can't get the length of a string. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, const num as string equals number, and I'm just going to do a sneaky little way of doing it. Okay, num is the digit of number at index n. Okay, num equals num as string at n. Num2, okay, num2 is the digit of number at index length of number minus 1. Okay, so this is going to be num as string dot length minus 1 minus n. If num is not num2, return false. And then at the end here, kind of the implication is return true. You can see also that wasn't in my pseudocode. I just know at the end of this, oh, well, because if I got to the end of this for loop, I didn't find anything that failed, which means implicitly it is returning true. However, functions in JavaScript return undefined, which correlates to false. So I need to add this return true. If that confuses you, make sure that you put that in your pseudocode so you don't forget it. I didn't have to because, again, this is my own little pseudocode language, and I remember that sort of thing, hopefully. Oh, I forgot to actually copy the pseudocode in here, so let's actually do that. This pseudocode actually makes a little bit more sense, right? I might want to change this one. Is the, I would say, corresponding digit of number at opposite end. Okay. These two don't need comments. Another thing that you also could do here, this is actually the simplified version of this. This works. This works totally fine, and this is great. Because it's just a string, you actually can just return as string dot reverse string. I don't actually know if reverse exists on JavaScript. You may need to turn this into an array first, but if you do that, turn it into an array, reverse it, put it back together, it should read the same. It's a palindrome. That's kind of a clever way of doing it. This is totally fine though, because this actually shows that you really understand what's going on there and you really understand how to handle it. This says, I know what a palindrome is. I know how to check for a palindrome. Why are you asking me this question? This is a waste of time. Which honestly, if I got this as an answer, I wouldn't be offended as an interviewer. It just means you understand enough about the problem space to give me a clever answer, and that's totally fine. But this is also totally fine because this shows that you actually understood how to build the algorithm. So yeah, really the idea here, if you're having trouble going from pseudocode to actual code, your pseudocode's not detailed enough, you're missing something, check, see what that is. What are you not understanding? Because your pseudocode should be statement to statement turnable into code. I mean, with some, like you might have to add some stuff, or in our previous example, you may turn 2 statements. But it really shouldn't be complicated once you get from pseudocode to code. So if you're having complexities with this, your pseudocode needs to be good. You might be saying, oh, but I thought programming was all about writing code. It's not. Software engineering is all about writing algorithms. Code is the after effect of what we do, which means that really this part is the most important piece. So this is the part that you really want to practice and get good at. I hope this is helpful, folks. Have a good one. Good luck. We'll see y'all next time.